Are you ready to dive in the world of project management? Hit that subscribe button as we explore how to stay relevant in an agile workforce. When I was in college, I served tables, and we had a bunch of various different types of servers. You had some servers that wrote every single thing down because they wanted to record things and make sure that things were accurate when they were entering everything into the system. And then we also had the servers that just wanted to memorize everything. Now, I was not one of those servers that wanted to memorize everything because I knew, and I had experienced myself, those servers that tried to memorize everything and did not, and messed up my order. And those servers that messed up my order, that tried to memorize everything, left a bad taste in my mouth. And those were some of those lessons learned that I took on into project management, creating meeting notes, taking meeting notes. Now, it doesn't have to be as detailed. There's no specific rule of how much and how detailed you need to be with your meeting notes, but you need to track, you need to record what is being discussed. Not only for historical purposes, lessons learned, you may need to go back to those meeting notes and find out what was discussed years down the road. Let's say there's a follow-on contract. That starts as the foundation, the historical record. Meeting notes are critical. It also can show you trends. You can also look at those meeting notes and see the trajectory of the project as it's going along. I've been a part of many projects where meeting notes weren't required or desired, but I make sure that I incorporate them in every single one of my projects. And you don't want to be one of those servers that's just trying to memorize everything, or a project manager that's just trying to memorize everything and try to remember what was discussed 6 years ago, 6 months ago, 6 weeks ago, sometimes 6 hours ago. I forget what was discussed. So that's one of the main reasons why meeting notes are so critical, not only just to project management, but into any field. Now, I want to talk about some of the benefits of meeting notes, some of the reasons why I use meeting notes, and then also some of the key areas and key things that you want to make sure that you're having in your meeting notes when you're preparing them and when you're looking back at them. So first and foremost, some of the benefits of meeting notes. Like I mentioned, it improves clarity and understanding. You can use meeting notes to follow up with individuals. When you're keeping your meeting notes, even you just jotting down bullets from what was happening during the meeting, it starts as that foundational standpoint of those follow-up actions. Who you need to follow up on and follow up with. What extra tasks do you need to accomplish? Those meeting notes start with that foundation. Are there any other areas of clarity that you need to get discussed about? Are there any other stakeholders that you might need to reach out to that were discussed during that meeting? Without properly recording that, you may forget those follow-up actions, those individuals that you might need to meet with. So that's another huge benefit of creating those meeting notes. It also enhances that accountability. When you're creating those meeting notes, you want to make sure that you create those meeting notes as soon as possible after the meeting. Within the first hour of that meeting, it's highly desired because you know what was discussed. Now, unless you're recording those meetings, then you can go and play those things back and then record. But also, you may not see the full context because during some of these virtual meetings, depending upon the platform that you're using, it may only show the presenter. Whereas in the actual meeting, you're looking at all the stakeholders who are actually in the meeting and you're seeing their facial cues. So those may not be as representatives. That's another reason why you want to make sure that you're doing this as soon and as close after that meeting has happened. So ideally within that first hour post meeting. And there are AI tools that can help with that if you're using some virtual or platform technologies for these meetings. But that's another huge thing, the accountability aspect of it, being able to follow up on those actions. Also, meeting notes helps resolve conflicts. If there are any conflicts, any disagreements that are discussed during that meeting, you can record that information, jot that stuff down. If you're seeing facial expressions, those are things that can be recorded in these meeting notes that can be followed up on, and you can resolve potential conflicts before they keep on expanding further down the road. Imagine a server, that just went to a table, just gathered the whole entire order, just try to memorize it. Then all of a sudden they're stopped by a manager. They just pour a ton of information. They completely forget the order, or they remember bits and pieces. And then they go and just enter that order in. And then the food runner delivers the food to the table. And everyone's wondering, this is parts of the things that I ordered, but this is not what I had ordered. That individual has lost that trust. And now, who are they going to blame? Who's that server going to blame? Are they going to blame the kitchen? No, it wasn't the kitchen's fault. Are they going to blame the manager? No, it wasn't the manager's fault. It was their fault for not just jotting that information down, taking that extra step to create those meeting notes, or just those notes just in general. That was technically a meeting. It was a brief meeting, but they still could have jotted down those notes. And no different than that being a project. When you're dealing with a project or managing a project, you want to make sure that you have that historical record that you can follow up on. See if there are any issues that you can resolve conflict. You don't want that to fester, to grow, and then you're trying to chase things down weeks, months after the fact. Also, it improves communication by creating meeting notes and also generally making them public. That's another thing. You don't want to just keep your notes to yourself. You want to make sure that you share those notes, because then other individuals can. Now, you don't want to just all of a sudden just revise those notes and say, okay, well, this is this person's opinion. You want to be objective about those notes, but you also want to share those notes so it shares that collective understanding. It shares transparency following that meeting, that everyone can look back and see, okay, this is how the meeting was. But also, if someone wants to go later down the road, they can trust that that transparent information in those meeting notes have not changed. So you also want to make sure that you have those meeting notes. Once those are created by the individual, you want to have those date and time stamped. Now, if you want to have an approval process of that, you can add that. That may be more bureaucratic. It may stray away from the full core function of what those meeting notes are, and that's just being objective and classifying and categorizing what happened and transpired during that meeting. So you don't want to have too many revisions to those meeting notes. You just want to be objective when you're creating those meeting notes, but also make sure that it's visible, it's shared, and it's transparent. You don't want to have just one side seeing the meeting notes and the other side is not seeing the meeting notes, because then where's that communication? Meeting notes are supposed to improve communication, not pigeonhole or make some individuals feel like they're left out. Now, some of the elements that you want to make sure that you're including in these meeting notes are the key discussion points. Obviously, when you start a meeting, you want to have an agenda. So from that agenda, you want to have those discussion points, and then you want to have correspondingly what was discussed from those discussion points. You don't have to be word for word. They just need a basic summary of the information, so then they can recall and get more of an understanding of what happened. And that's the main objective with those meeting notes. Case in point, bringing it back to that serving illustration. Just by, even if a person just wrote burger, not even what temperature and all the toppings, that at least leads them into the right direction, where they know that the patron is wanting a burger, not a chicken sandwich, not a steak, a burger. So right there, that shows the importance of just even a little bit of that note can help the individual get to that final end goal of making sure that that end customer is satisfied. So that's one of the key things, is making sure that you have the key discussion points and then what came from those discussion points. Also, any of those decisions that were being made. If there are any critical decisions, you want to make sure that those decisions are being recorded. Let's say that you're supposed to task someone to do some sort of task. Make sure that those are recorded in those meeting notes. Any of those decisions, you want to make sure that those are recorded in those meeting notes. Case in point, bringing it back. If a person is allergic to a special seasoning, let's say salt. Believe it or not, I've had a person when I was serving tables that was allergic to salt. You want to make sure that that, from a decision standpoint, is recorded in those notes. So then there's no question when it comes to the kitchen that there's no salt for this patron or any of the things that may touch this patron's meal and dishes. So those are the same reasons why you want to make sure that those key decisions, those critical areas, are recorded. Action items, like I mentioned, any of those follow-up actions or action items, you want to make sure that are recorded in the meeting notes. Even if it's just you agreed, or even if it's just creating the meeting notes and distributing it out to the rest of the team members. Any of those action items, whether big or small, need to be recorded in those meeting notes. And last but not least, the next steps. If there are any follow-up actions, if there are any next steps, make sure that those are recorded in the meeting notes. So like I mentioned, the key areas that you were discussing, and this is discussion points, which is really corresponding the agenda, any decisions that came from that meeting, any follow-up action items, and any next steps. Those are the 4 areas that you need to make sure are in your meeting notes. And like I said, on the most part, it's subjective. Not all projects or contracts are going to require meeting notes, but I highly recommend the use of this because it's made a break. It can be the make or break for any project. I had a current project that didn't require meeting notes. The end customer, I noticed during the meeting, we would have weekly meetings. They would just jot things down. And, I asked the customer because, obviously my best practice was creating meeting notes. Hey, would you possibly want to share any of those meeting notes that you have? And the customer was like, oh, no, those are just jottings. I'm just jotting things down. Now, I consider those meeting notes. And honestly, I personally think from a transparency standpoint, that type of information should be shared. Now, on my side, I am making sure that my information is out there and is publicly accessible and available. That's a huge critical thing for transparency. But also, I understand some customers may not want that, and that's 100% fine. That's their choice. But my choice is that from a communication standpoint, I wanted to make sure that my information is publicly available, publicly accessible, so they can know what was publicly discussed during these meetings. So then it reduces any of that uncertainty. Now, is there still uncertainty on my end from any of those jottings? Yes, but that's an individual choice that individual has. You can't force people to do things. You can only do things yourself. And for myself, that's why I make sure in any practice, no matter how big or how small, I create meeting notes. Hopefully, if you enjoyed this content and this lesson, you come back to learn more lessons about other topics in project management. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more project management content. See you on the next one.